The philosopher who solved the meaning of life. Leo Tolstoy, how he found peace. We live in a world that celebrates achievement, but rarely questions its cost. What happens when success feels hollow and happiness fades despite everything going right? In this video, we follow the journey of Leo Tolstoy, one of the greatest minds in literature, as he confronts despair, dismantles the illusions of reason, and finds a surprising path to peace. This story is not just his, it might be yours too. Stay until the end to uncover what truly gives life meaning and how the quiet strength within can be forged, not found. When everything in life is fulfilled, but the soul remains empty, Leo Tolstoy had it all. He was one of the most celebrated writers in history, the author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina. His books had become cultural monuments. He was wealthy, owned vast estates, and was surrounded by a large and loving family. His life, at least on the outside, appeared enviable. Many looked at him as a man who had conquered life itself. But beneath the surface of worldly success, something dark was growing. At the age of 50, Tolstoy found himself haunted by a persistent and terrifying question. Why am I alive? What is the point of all this? The very accomplishments he once thought would bring fulfillment now felt hollow. His fame did not comfort him. His wealth no longer excited him. His family, once a source of joy, could not shield him from the quiet fear creeping in each night. What changed? Why does a man who has everything begin to feel as though he has nothing? Tolstoy began to realize that external achievements cannot resolve internal unrest. The deeper he looked into himself, the more he discovered a vast emptiness and emotional silence that no praise or possession could fill. He described this moment not as sadness, but as a kind of awakening, one that exposed the fragile foundation upon which his life had been built. He wasn't just disillusioned with success, he was frightened by its inability to answer life's most basic questions. This is not just Tolstoy's story. It is a mirror for many of us. How often do we chase goals believing they will bring lasting happiness, only to discover a strange stillness once we've reached them? We are not taught to examine this stillness. Society tells us that success equals meaning. But what happens when success arrives and meaning doesn't? Tolstoy's crisis challenges us to consider something uncomfortable. What if the life we have built is impressive on the outside but hollow on the inside? What if we've climbed the ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall? His story invites us to stop, reflect, and ask whether we are living from a place of depth or merely achievement. Existential crisis, when the mind becomes the most dangerous place. At the height of his despair, Tolstoy found himself trapped in a terrifying mental prison. The very mind that once created masterpieces now became a place of torment. He would lie awake at night, afraid to sleep, not because of nightmares, but because he feared waking up. Each morning greeted him with the same haunting thought: why go on living? What is the point of all this? He began to view death not as something to be feared, but as a logical and perhaps even necessary conclusion. It was not an emotional breakdown. It was a philosophical collapse. What made his suffering more complex was that he could not explain it away. He was not in financial ruin. He was not alone. He was not ill, yet inside he was unraveling. The structure of his inner world was disintegrating, meaning once a stable foundation now felt like a myth he had once believed in, but could no longer justify. The questions came like waves. Why do anything? Why write? Why care for his family? Why eat or get out of bed? Every action seemed absurd when faced with the inevitability of death. He described this period as walking a tightrope above an abyss. At any moment, the illusion of balance could break. There was no tragedy that caused it. The despair came silently like a shadow stretching across his days. His mind, brilliant and sharp, turned against him. It analyzed life to the point of paralysis. No belief system could soothe him. Religion, science, philosophy all failed to provide something he could hold on to. Tolstoy's crisis shows us a painful truth. Sometimes the greatest suffering is invisible. It wears the face of success, reason, even sanity. But deep inside it corrodes like acid. It is not weakness. It is not madness. It is a confrontation with the void that reason alone cannot survive. Many who appear calm and accomplished are in fact at war with their thoughts. To understand this is to be more compassionate. To recognize that the mind can be both sanctuary and battlefield is to approach others with humility. Not every silent person is at peace. Not every smile is whole. Tolstoy's story is not just about despair. It is about the courage to see the truth of one's suffering and to begin searching even when all paths appear empty. Reason cannot save the soul. A journey through philosophy and science. After sinking into despair, Tolstoy did what many intelligent people do when they are lost. He turned to books. If life made no sense, perhaps others had found answers. He began reading the works of philosophers, both ancient and modern. Socrates, Schopenhauer, Solomon Buddha. He examined ideologies, moral systems, even scientific theories. If God seemed silent, maybe reason would speak. But reason did not speak in comfort. It spoke in riddles and cold logic. Philosophy offered him insight but no peace. Every argument seemed to circle back to the same conclusion that life is transient, uncertain, and absurd. If death is the inevitable end, then what justifies the struggle to live? Each thinker added layers of analysis but stripped away meaning. Science too disappointed him. In the face of biology, psychology, and evolution, human life appeared mechanical and accidental. Darwinism told him we are products of chance cells designed to survive, but doomed to die. According to science, value depends on function. The moment we stop functioning, we lose our worth. This cold framework offered facts but no warmth. It explained the how, but not the why. Tolstoy was not rejecting knowledge. He was searching for something deeper than explanation. He wanted understanding that touched the soul, not just the intellect. Theories could describe life, but they could not make him want to live it. That distinction became painfully clear. The more he read, the more he saw the limits of logic. Reason could identify the patterns of suffering, but it could not relieve the pain. It could dissect the fear of death, but not erase it. It could name the chaos, but not calm it. Like a map with no destination, reason showed him where he stood, but offered no direction. This was the paradox that haunted him. The mind can be brilliant and still lost. A person can possess immense knowledge and still be tormented by questions no textbook can answer. Tolstoy was not seeking to escape thought. He was seeking to escape thought without meaning. His journey reveals something modern society often forgets. That intellect alone is not enough. That understanding without connection becomes sterile. That reason, when isolated, can become its own kind of prison. For Tolstoy, the path to peace would not be found in ideas alone. He needed something to believe in, not just something to think about. The story of the man and the honey. Life is a deep well of contradictions. One of the most powerful moments in Tolstoy's writings comes through a parable he includes in his essay, A Confession. It is the story of a man being chased by a wild beast. In his desperate attempt to escape, he jumps into a dry well. But at the bottom of the well is a dragon with its mouth wide open. To avoid falling into the jaws of the dragon, the man grabs onto a branch growing from the side of the well. Hanging in between, he notices two mice gnawing at the branch, one black and one white. They represent day and night time constantly wearing down his fragile hold. In this terrifying situation, the man sees drops of honey on the leaves of the branch. Despite the danger, he reaches out and licks the honey. For Tolstoy, this parable was not just a metaphor. It was a mirror. The wild beast was the fear of death chasing him. The dragon below was the inevitable end waiting for all of us. The mice were the steady passing of time, and the honey, the small pleasures of life that distracted him from the terrifying truth. Sweet but brief, beautiful but powerless to change the outcome. This image struck him deeply. He saw that he had lived like the man in the well, enjoying the sweetness of life without truly confronting the horror beneath it. Pleasure, art, family, success, they were his honey. But now the illusion was breaking. The mice never stopped gnawing. The dragon never went away. And the honey began to lose its taste. The story reveals something profound about human nature. We often survive, not because we solve life's mysteries, but because we learn to look away. We cling to little joys while pretending not to see the abyss beneath us. And yet there comes a moment when pretending no longer works. The sweetness fades. The fear returns. Tolstoy's realization was painful. He began to understand that no amount of beauty or success could shield him from the fundamental questions of existence. The honey could no longer distract him. He had to choose, either fall into despair or search for a deeper kind of meaning. The parable did not give him answers, but it gave him clarity. It showed him where he stood between fear and death, with time slipping away and with nothing to hold on to except a fleeting sweetness. He could no longer live as if the honey was enough. He had to find something stronger than pleasure, more enduring than comfort. He had to discover whether life had meaning not just in moments, but in its whole. That question would guide everything he did from that point forward. 4 types of people facing absurdity. Which group do you belong to? As Tolstoy sank deeper into existential reflection, he began observing how different people around him dealt with the same haunting questions. If life is fleeting, suffering is constant, and death inevitable, then how does one choose to live? He identified 4 kinds of responses, 4 psychological strategies people adopt when confronting the absurd nature of existence. Each one tells us something essential about the human condition. The first group simply ignores the problem. They live as if everything is fine. They focus on daily routines, material goals, and personal pleasures. Tolstoy saw this as a kind of blindness, not due to stupidity, but from distraction. Life is absurd, but they pretend it is not. This avoidance works for a while, especially when things are comfortable. But as illness, loss, or aging arrives, the illusion cracks. One cannot ignore the abyss forever. The second group embraces pleasure. These are the Epicureans. They accept life has no ultimate purpose and decide to enjoy what they can. Food, love, beauty, entertainment. This strategy brings temporary relief but fails to satisfy the deeper hunger for meaning. Tolstoy criticized this path as chasing honey while falling into the well. It may sweeten the moment, but it does not stop the fall. The third group chooses despair. These people see no answer, no escape, no hope. They come to the conclusion that ending life is the only rational response. Tolstoy himself flirted with this perspective during his darkest moments, but he ultimately rejected it. He believed that even in hopelessness, something sacred remains. The impulse to seek meaning, even through pain, is a kind of resistance, a whisper of faith that refuses to die. The fourth group does nothing. They neither enjoy blindly nor collapse completely. They are trapped in between, aware of the absurdity but paralyzed by it. Tolstoy saw this as the most dangerous state. These individuals live in quiet resignation, not because they are at peace, but because they are numb. They drift through life without belief, without resistance, without purpose. Their minds are not at war, but they are not at rest either. This condition is not calm, it is surrender. Tolstoy's classification is not just intellectual, it is emotional. It invites us to examine our own responses. Are we escaping, indulging, collapsing, or freezing? His goal was not to judge, but to understand. Through this understanding, we may learn how to move forward. Maybe not with all the answers, but with more honesty. The simplicity of the poor, light from the most unexpected place. Tolstoy spent years trying to reason his way to peace. He read the greatest thinkers. He challenged religious doctrines. He explored science and logic. But all of it left him colder. He had climbed every ladder the intellectual world could offer, only to find emptiness waiting at the top. Then unexpectedly, he began observing something quietly powerful. It was not in books or theories. It was in the lives of the poor. While Tolstoy struggled with despair despite his wealth and reputation, he noticed that peasants who lived with almost nothing seemed to carry a kind of peace he could not explain. They toiled in harsh conditions, often with little food, no education, and no security. Yet many of them held a strong, unshakable faith. It was not the faith of scholars or priests. It was not argued or defended. It simply existed, lived, breathed, carried silently through suffering. This discovery shook Tolstoy. He had always assumed that the answers to life's deepest questions must be complex and hard to reach. But the people who seemed to endure life's cruelty with dignity and calm had found strength in something simple. Their belief in a higher power gave them not just comfort, but meaning. While he questioned everything, they accepted mystery. While he demanded proof, they lived with trust. While he feared death, they prepared for it with peace. He realized that intellect could not replace faith. That logic could not feed the soul. The poor had taught him that peace is not a product of knowledge, but of alignment. When the inner life is connected to something beyond the self, suffering becomes bearable. Life becomes purposeful again. Tolstoy did not suddenly become a man of blind belief, but he began to see that his war with existence was partly a war with humility. In his search for truth, he had overlooked the quiet wisdom of those who never needed to search. Their lives, though harsh, were not meaningless, and neither was his if he could learn what they had always known. Faith does not have to be perfect. Tolstoy's path to liberation. Tolstoy did not return to religion in the way many expected. He did not embrace church rituals or doctrines he once rejected. His transformation was not about adopting a system. It was about surrendering his need to control every answer. After years of searching, of exhausting philosophy and science, he began to open to something he could not define but could feel, not a conclusion, a presence. This faith did not arrive like a flash of light. It grew slowly, quietly. It was born from exhaustion, from humility. It was not a perfect belief, but a willingness to believe. A space within him softened. He began to live not with certainty, but with trust. He stopped demanding that life prove itself and started learning how to live within its mystery. He found peace not by solving existence, but by yielding to it, by accepting that meaning is not always loud, that some truths are felt, not explained, that to be human is to doubt and still move forward. He saw that faith is not the opposite of reason. It is what fills the gaps reason leaves behind. This shift changed his life. He no longer sought greatness. He gave up many of his possessions. He simplified his habits. He began focusing on service to others, on honesty, on silence. He found joy in things he once ignored. His inner world, once filled with fear, began to settle. Not because he had all the answers, but because he no longer needed them. Tolstoy's version of faith was deeply personal. It did not fit neatly into any religious box. It was messy, evolving, human. But it gave him something he had never found through thinking alone. A quiet strength, a reason to continue, a way to love without needing control. His journey reminds us that faith is not about perfection. It is about openness, about trusting something larger than yourself, even if you cannot name it. It is not a solution, but a direction, a place to rest when the questions do not end. For Tolstoy, that was enough, and perhaps for us it can be too. The people around Tolstoy, when others reflect the soul within. Tolstoy's transformation was not a solitary journey. It unfolded in the presence of others, and their responses mirrored different aspects of his inner world. His wife Sophia, once his closest companion, struggled to understand the man he was becoming. As he renounced wealth and status, she felt abandoned, confused by his rejection of the life they had built together. Her reaction was not one of cruelty, but of fear. She was watching the man she loved become someone she no longer recognized. Among his fellow intellectuals, Tolstoy encountered resistance. They saw his embrace of faith and simplicity as a betrayal of reason. Some dismissed his insights as madness. Others questioned his sincerity. These reactions only deepened his sense of isolation. He had once been admired by these circles, and now he stood apart from them. He realized that the more he stepped into his truth, the more alone he might become. But among the peasants, he found something different. They did not debate or criticize. They simply accepted. Their presence reminded him of a deeper kind of wisdom, one not bound by theories or institutions. In their quiet endurance, he saw resilience. In their humility, he found mirrors of the peace he was trying to cultivate. Tolstoy began to see that the people around him were not obstacles, but reflections. Each person revealed a layer of his own conflict. His wife reflected his past and the cost of change. The intellectuals reflected the pride and doubt he had to leave behind. The poor reflected the strength he hoped to build. We often think personal growth happens in isolation, but it is often forged in the presence of others. Reactions from those closest to us test our convictions. Their confusion, resistance, or even love force us to look deeper. Tolstoy's life reminds us that transformation is not only internal, it is relational. The soul is not shaped alone. It is refined in the mirrors others hold up to us. From despair to freedom, inner strength is not found but forged. Tolstoy did not stumble upon inner strength. He built it slowly and deliberately. After years of questioning, doubting, and unraveling everything he once believed, he began the quiet task of rebuilding himself, not as a philosopher or a nobleman, but as a human being, someone who could live simply, love deeply, and serve honestly. His transformation did not come from sudden enlightenment. It came from daily decisions. He simplified his life, gave up wealth, and focused on work that connected him to others. He wrote less for recognition and more for clarity. He stopped trying to be great and started trying to be good. The shift was not dramatic, but it was profound. Tolstoy learned that freedom is not the absence of suffering. It is the strength to meet suffering with purpose. He stopped looking for a life without pain and began creating a life that could carry pain without collapsing. He discovered that peace does not mean silence. It means harmony within noise. That control does not mean dominance. It means presence in the middle of chaos. This kind of strength cannot be bought or borrowed. It must be lived. It grows through practice, through patience, through humility. Tolstoy was no longer asking the world to change. He was changing himself to meet the world with a steadier heart. The man who once feared every sunrise now greeted the day with resolve. His journey is a reminder that meaning is not something we find by accident. It is something we earn through courage. That wholeness is not a gift. It is a practice. That being human is not about being perfect, but about being honest enough to rebuild from ruin. Tolstoy's life ended not in defeat, but in peace. Not because the world became easier, but because he became stronger. He proved that despair is not the end. It is the doorway. That freedom is not found at the top of the ladder, but in the steps we take with intention. And that strength is not waiting inside us. It is shaped over time by the choices we dare to make.